So, well, and that's kind of rare. There aren't a lot of people that, they meet in high school and they date and then boom, they get married and stuff like that. But here's the thing. Every one of us, at least to some degree, we long to be loved. We want to be loved and we want to receive love. But it's very difficult for us to receive love. It's very difficult for us to give love because very few of us really understand what love is all about. We think we understand what love is about. We think we know how to give love. And for many of us, the best examples of love was our parents. That's pretty much where most of us received love. It's where we learned about love, at least marital love and parent love. That's where we learned it from. And our parents may have or may not have been good role models. And whether that's the case or not, I think it's very tragic that so many homes in our country, they don't make it. So many couples in divorce. And I don't really think the issue has to do with love itself, because for most of us, like me and Grace, for example, that was more of an infatuation. I thought she looked good. I was attracted to her not because of who she was as a person, but I was attracted to her because of the way she looked. And even when I met Rhonda, at first, when I first saw her, it was an attraction based on the way she looked. Pure and simple. It was nothing more than that. The story is very simple. I walked into the dorm room or the dorm lobby. My glasses had fogged up. I couldn't see. When they unfogged, the first person I saw was Rhonda, and my thought was, wow, look at that woman. And at that point, I wanted to meet her and get to know her. But I learned that love really has to be a lot deeper than that infatuation, I'm attracted to you physically kind of love, if we're going to have relationships that are going to last for a lifetime. So how do we get there? Well, do we get there because we've got to understand what love is about. The reason we have trouble loving is because we don't really understand love. We've never experienced real love. We either we haven't received real love, or we're not in a relationship where love is something that we've figured out. Now, I'm just getting right to the point. Real love comes from a relationship with God, pure and simple. Now, there are many couples that stay married forever, and they could say, well, I'm not a godly person, or I don't believe in Jesus, and, I don't believe in all that stuff, and their marriage is probably pretty good. But I'm saying to you that if you want the best in your relationship, you've got to have a relationship with God. Let's watch this clip. Tasha, if you'll throw it up. You see, that's really the whole problem with so many of us. We know about God. We think a little about God. Some of us may even have a relationship with God, meaning we've said the proverbial sinner's prayer. God, I know I'm a sinner, and I ask you to forgive me of my sins and come into my life and change me and make me one of your children. But then we kind of stop there. We don't continue to develop and nurture that relationship. And last week we had a lot of fun with the whole marriage thing. We talked about we talked about the differences between men and women, and they are so vast. Men think different than women, and women think so different from men, and we don't understand each other. And we talked about some very practical ways to do that, and we got to the bottom line that what men really want and need in order to feel love is to be respected by their wife, to be his hero. And what a woman really needs from her husband is to be unconditionally loved, to be sacrificially loved, to be heard, to be listened to for the guy to say your needs and your wants are more important than my needs and my wants. And it's not in our nature to give those kinds of love features or those love characteristics to our spouse. And the reason I think it is so hard is because we don't really understand love. We haven't really experienced love, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I think the scene we just watched is probably the most powerful scene in the entire movie, because it's the scene that the whole movie is anchored on. In fact, it's the whole thing that this whole series is anchored on. We can read the Bible and we can get a lot of good self-help tools out of it. We can look at TV, we can read books, and we can get a lot of self-help tools. But if our relationship with God is not where it needs to be, then we're going to be limited in how far we can go. Trust me. I made a vow to stay married to Rhonda for life. This ring that's on my finger is a constant reminder that we took a vow, that I made a promise. and that my promise to her is to love her and to cherish her until death parts us. There are times she absolutely gets on my nerves. There are times she absolutely angers me. There are times she absolutely frustrates me. There are times, I might think, my goodness, maybe there's another woman out there that's better than her. Maybe the grass is greener on the other side. But those are only moments that come and pass, because the bottom line is she's the one that I married. She's the one that I love. She's the one that I gave my heart and life to. She's the one that God wants me to care for. She's the one that God wants me to sacrificially love. And so no matter how frustrated I may get at times, I have to love her unconditionally. And I can't do that if my relationship with God is not in a growing, dynamic way. So here's the first thing for us to get this morning, that our earthly relationships, if we're going to experience real love, we've got to, it begins with God. We just got to settle that issue that our relationships here on earth always begin with God. We can't get away from that. When I met Grace, I wasn't a Christian. When I met other girls in high school, I wasn't a Christ follower. I knew about God. I knew some things about God, but I didn't really know God. It wasn't until I became a person who said, I'm going to follow God, that my life and my perspective totally and completely changed. Let's look at what 1 John 4, verses 7 through 10 say. Dear friends, and the guy that wrote this, John, he was a really old guy by this point, and so he's writing to some dear friends of his. He says, Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love. Not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Here's what I want you to grab from those few verses. That word love is mentioned, I didn't count them, a lot of times in those few verses. And the word for love there is a word that means unconditional love. You might have heard of the word agape before. This is the Greek word for unconditional love. It means I love you without restraint. And that's what Caleb's dad was saying to him. As Caleb thought about his relationship with his wife, Catherine, and he thought about the past 20 days, all the things that he had done for her, all of the positive things he had done to show love to her, and she rejected every single one of them. And what his dad tried to help him understand is, son, you've rejected God's love, and your question is, how can I love someone who constantly rejects me? You see, the thing is, he didn't understand unconditional love. And that's the problem with so many of us. When we get frustrated with our spouse, what we're really saying is, I don't love you unconditionally. That infatuation is gone, that I'm so attracted to you feeling is gone. I look at you and I get disgusted. You make me barf. I want to slap you. I want to peel your eyes out. Okay, you guys are looking like, oh my gosh, are these things he's thinking? No, I don't think that about Rhonda. I never want to slap her, hit her, or gouge her eyes out. I do at times want to leave the room. And I don't want to see her because I am so angry at that moment or so frustrated at that moment. But what I'm saying is, if we don't control those emotions and those thoughts, if we can't look at our wife or our husband and say, I love you unconditionally. I want to love you like God loves you. I want to love you no matter, if you love me back. You see, for most of us, we were taught that you give love to people who love you in return. But for people who don't love you, you don't have to love them. We can say, oh, I love everybody. I love everybody. But love is not a word, it's an action. It's something that you do for someone. It's something you do to someone. It is you are involved in that person's life to help them and to help them benefit. And that's what God did for us. In these verses, John, he basically said this: God demonstrated his love for us in a very powerful way. Even though we rejected God, even though we spat on God's face, even though we said, God, I know about you, but I don't want to know you, even though I want the benefits of heaven without really having a relationship with you, God said, in spite of all of these things that you think, I am going to make a way for you to go to heaven. And all you've got to do is just say, God, I confess my sin, I confess my need for you, and I want you to change my life. And those of us who say that prayer, those of us who mean that prayer, then God changes us. We become, as Jesus told Nicodemus, born again. We're born of the Spirit of God. And it's not just knowing about God. Did you know that the demons, the devil, and all the demons that follow him, they know a lot about God? I mean, but they're not going to spend eternity in heaven. I mean, so in other words, knowing the facts about God, knowing that there is a God, knowing that there is a Jesus, knowing that He, died on a cross, knowing that there's a Christmas story and an Easter story, it's not enough. You've got to move beyond the facts, and you've got to move it to your hearts. So for many of us in this world, and maybe even somebody in here, our knowledge of God is up in our brain. I want to point to my head, but I can't. This arm won't move that far. And I've got to hold the mic with this one. So there. It's got to move from here, from the brain, into our heart. And so that's where it starts. And for Caleb, in the movie, he knew about God. But in this scene, he understood, if I'm going to try and make a difference in my marriage, but more importantly, my life, then I've got to know the author of love. God is the author of love. The whole Bible is nothing more than a love story from God to each and every one of us. And so we need to understand this very simple thing. But for those of us who have made that commitment, you've said, hey, I'm a Christian, I'm following Christ, or I've said the prayer and I've even been baptized, I've done those things. Why then am I struggling in my marriage? I don't want to struggle. I want to make my marriage work. I want to make my other relationships work. Why do I struggle? Well, it leads us to the second thing. If we want to have real love, then we've got to still include God in our life. We can't just say a prayer when we were in elementary school or maybe high school or maybe college or what. We've got to continue in a relationship with God. If Rhonda and I just decided, we're going to stay married, but we don't really like each other that much, and we're just going to kind of do our own thing. We've got a nice big house here, and if I said, you know what, Rhonda, you can have the master bedroom, and guys, you're probably saying, no, the dude gets the master bedroom. Whatever, this is just an illustration. Say, okay, Rhonda, you can have the master bedroom, and I'll take one of the other bedrooms. I'm going to stay in there, you stay in there, and when we want, we'll eat together. If we want to go on a trip together, we'll go on a trip together. We'll probably see each other maybe in passing in the mornings and maybe in the afternoon some. But, I'm going to live my life, you live your life. But we're going to stay married. That's not much of a marriage, is it? Pretty soon we will grow so far apart, and we will have so developed our own independent lives that we're going to look at each other and we're going to go, I don't really know who you are. We're roommates at this point. But that's the way we do with God so often. We're just roommates with God. It's not a real relationship. There's a relationship there, but it's not a growing relationship. It's not a dynamic relationship. It's not an intimate relationship. It's just a roommate arrangement. God's there, when we need Him, and when we don't need Him, well, we know He's there if we do need Him. He's like the heavenly granddaddy, the heavenly bank, the heavenly doctor. The one we cry on and call out to when we're hurt, the first words out of my mouth when I fell off the ladder were not, "Dear Jesus, help me." No, those weren't the first words out of my mouth. It was something like, "Owie, that really hurt. That hurt really, really bad." It reverberated all through my body. Anyway, enough of that. It's a bad memory. I have nightmares about it. So here's something I want you to think about. Let's look at 1 John 4, verses 16 and 17. He says, "And so we know and rely on the love God has for us. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in him. In this way, love is made complete among us." You see, if you're not living in God, then your love, for God or anybody else, including your spouse, will not be complete. It's just going to be half done. This morning, Rhonda makes some biscuits, yummy to my tummy. I was sitting in the recliner, my foot was propped up, and I was trying to relax. And it was really hurting at that point. I hadn't taken anything, and it was actually aching, throbbing. And I just heard her say, "Oh, these biscuits aren't done." She'd already cut it open. She said, "It's kind of gooey in the middle." And I'm thinking, I don't really care. Bring it on. But she insisted that she put them back in the oven to finish it up. And, for a lot of us, we want our food done. We want it complete. And the same is true with our love relationships. We want our love for other people to be as complete as possible. But we go about it all in the wrong way. Here's a question for you. When you look in the mirror, what do you see? Obviously, you see your reflection. But look deeper than the physical. And try to look into your heart. What do you see? What are the characteristics? What are the, when you think about your character, the things that you say, the things that you do, the things that you love, the things that take up and occupy your thoughts during the day. You see, that's the real you. It's not what you look like on the outside. That's just a facade of who you are. But the real you is deep inside. Now, what do you think about during the day? What occupies your time? What are the thoughts that seem to dominate your mind? When you get into stressful situations, how do you react and how do you respond? So all of these things have an effect on you. And the mirror principle basically says this: are you mirroring or are you reflecting the love of God in and through your life, or something else? And if you're reflecting God's love more than the other things, then good. But if not, then it's going to be very difficult for you to really love your spouse. In fact, I'm going to say it's going to be almost impossible for you to really love your spouse. If your thoughts are preoccupied with, I'm going to say, ungodly things that would not honor God, then it's going to be tough for you to really do that. We're going to look at some more of those kinds of things in the next few weeks. But the mirror principle is so key and so important. You've got to take a deep look into your life. Jesus has got to be your first love. In the Revelation, that's a really tough book to read and understand, but there's some chapters in the beginning that are really neat and really easy. But in the book of Revelation, Jesus told the church at Ephesus these words. He said, I know your works. I know what you're doing. I know all of the good things you're doing. And he said, you're very busy. You've done this and you've done that. You've done all these good, positive things for people. You help people. You serve people. But he said, this is the thing. You've left your first love. You're not really loving me. You see, Rhonda told me this not long ago. I was serving her a lot. I just did a lot of things for her. And she told me one day, she said, that's really nice. I'm glad that you are serving me. But I don't really care about that as much as I care about you. Now, that blew me away. I'm thinking, what do you mean? I'm doing stuff for you. She said, I want you more than the things. I want to spend time with you. I'm like, but these things have to be done. I'm relieving your stress. I didn't understand. You see, what she really was telling me was, if you love me, I want you to sit down and I want you to look at me and let's talk. I don't want to talk. I want to do stuff. Talking's tougher. But that's what she wanted. And so, because I'm supposed to sacrificially love her, that's what Jesus told guys to do, to sacrificially love their wives, to give up our wants, our wishes, our desires for our wife, then I had to sit down and just give her myself. I had to sit down and listen. If she wanted to go on a trip in the car, then we said, let's go ride. That meant more to her than the other things. You see, we can only get there if we understand that God sacrificially loves us. And the same is true for you wives. guys, us guys, we need you to respect us more than anything in the world. That's what we want. We want your respect. Have you ever heard this said, ladies? All my husband ever says is, I just nag, 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 nag. You ever heard that before? Okay, yeah, I know you have. Some of you don't want to look at me right now, and that's okay. I won't look at you either. Why do we guys not like you to nag at us? Well, because nagging, it's disrespectful. At its very core, it's disrespectful. It's saying, you're not respecting me as a man. You're not respecting what I have done, around here. Now, see, this is a reciprocal thing. It's a vicious kind of circle. Guys, it needs to start with us. We need to unconditionally love our wives, giving them what they really need. And here's the thing. If we give our wives what they really need, chances are they're going to give us the respect we long for. Which is why I spent so long last week on us. Just talking to us. And here's the thing. If our wives don't give us the respect we need, if you're living like we're talking about today in a relationship with God where you're pursuing Him and you're saying, God, I need you to help me love my spouse, then you're going to love her even if she doesn't give you respect. That is not always easy. Because something within us, our old spiritual nature, that old sinful nature cries out and says, I don't want to love you. And I don't have to love you because you're not loving me and you're not giving me what I need. But those of us who are saying, you know what? God, help me to love my wife, or God, help me to love my husband unconditionally, then it will come. And that will only come if we love Jesus and let Him love us. I think a lot of us have a hard time loving God because we're scared. We're afraid God will ask us to do something, or we'll become some kind of religious freak. I've known some religious freaks, and I'll just say it like that. They're just weird. And I'm not going to say any more than that because I don't want somebody that might be a religious freak to think I'm picking on them. I think some of us fear that we're going to just become, weird. And one of the things I've tried to do in my life the past couple of 3 years is to really ask this question. You remember the saying, WWJD, what would Jesus do? I don't think Jesus was weird. I don't think he was a religious psycho. He wasn't. He modeled the love of God perfectly. And here's what I'm trying to get at and trying to say. That's what we need to get at. Is just trying to live our life with God and with other people as Jesus did. And constantly asking this question, how would Jesus react and respond in this circumstance and in this situation? And then if we fail, we don't beat ourselves up and say, well, I'm done. I messed up. It's over. Let me forget it. We just move on. I know for me, I've tried to be as open and honest as I can about, I guess my failures as well as my successes. In other words, I'm just trying to be a real person to model for you guys that you don't have to fake it. You just be a real person, start where you are, love God, pursue God, get to know God, and when you do mess up, acknowledge it, pick up, and move on because God will always forgive you. That's the thing. And we can't get so hung up on, well, I'm not at this level, and just don't worry about that. Start where you are and move forward. So the question, I guess, to leave you with today is God your first love? I can't answer that question for you. I guess I could say there are days, or at least moments for me, when God is not my first love. I mean, there have been moments when I've kind of thought, I don't love God right now. And here's why I think that. I get confused by saying that love is an emotion. See, I don't feel loved by God, which means I don't feel I love God. But love is not a feeling, it's a decision. So we've got to get out of our brains that love is a feeling. I just don't feel loved. I don't feel my wife loves me. I don't feel my husband loves me. I don't feel she cares for me. I don't feel he cares for me. When you don't feel nothing, you don't feel nothing. And so you've got to move from the feeling to making a conscious decision. I choose to love you no matter what. I choose to love you. It is an intellectual decision, not an emotional decision. You can't give what you don't have. You can't give what you're not experiencing. And you've got to get to the point where you say, I am going to first love God. God is my first love. And I want to experience his love so I can give love. And if you can't do that, you are going to have a hard time in your relationships. It doesn't matter if it's your spouse or your kids. You're going to have a hard time. Because love it's more than an emotion. So here's my thought for you guys today. Here's what I want you to take home. Ask yourself this question: is Jesus my first love? And then the second question is, if not, what am I going to do about it? I mean, if you've never taken the first step, God, I want to begin a relationship with you as Caleb did, then today's the day. I mean, your marriage, your children, other relationships, it depends and hinges on that key relationship. You can say, I don't want to do it, I'll wait later. That's fine. It's your choice. I mean, nobody's going to make you do it. God wanted to make you do it. But I would say to you, if you really, 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 too many reallys, if you really want to experience real love in your life and in the lives of other people, you've got to start there. Pointing, no questions. If you have made that commitment, is Jesus your first love today? And if not, then just before you leave today, say a prayer. God, I want you to be my first love. Help me to make it happen. And then do whatever God wants you to do. Maybe it's just pick up a Bible and read a verse or two every day. Maybe it's take up a Bible and read a verse or two and say a short prayer. Just challenge yourself to learn more about the one who loves you. Spend some time with God. Let him be your best friend. And then when you learn, and what you learn from those daily walks with God, let it transfer into your marriage relationship.